paradrama tales.
Sorry, this table's for family. Only my brother smirked, pointing me to a folding chair next to the trash cans. 2 hours later, the 3/2/18 check came and the waiter brought it to me. I smiled, stood up and said, just loud enough, not my table. Then I walked out for good. My name's Eli. I'm 34. And if I had to describe my role in the family, it'd be simple, reliable. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the rebel. I wasn't the golden child. I was the one who showed up early, stayed late, sent birthday cards on time, and helped cover the mortgage when Dad's hours got cut. Quiet, steady, forgettable. That was me, my brother Mason. The exact opposite. He was all charm and chaos, the kind of guy who blew up his life and somehow still landed on his feet. Dropped out of college, fired from jobs, moved back in at 28. And still my parents looked at him like he hung the moon. Mason was the story they told proudly to neighbors, even when it didn't make sense. Me, I was the footnote. The one who held the foundation together so they could pretend it was all fine. I never demanded anything. Maybe that was my mistake. I didn't ask to be celebrated, I just wanted to be seen. I thought if I kept being useful, dependable, available one day, it would click. One day they'd say, Eli, we couldn't have done this without you. But that day never came. Instead, I got the backhanded compliments. Eli's just serious. He's always working. He wouldn't want to be in the middle of things anyway. So I laughed when they joked. I drove 3 hours for family holidays. I co-signed loans. I showed up at birthdays with thoughtful gifts, and I paid deposits I never saw returned. I called it love. They called it help. And for years I told myself it didn't matter. That being left out of group photos or skipped in toasts wasn't a big deal. That maybe love doesn't always look loud. But deep down, I was waiting, hoping, until that night, until that folding chair, until Mason pointed and smirked and said the words that cracked the illusion wide open. Sorry, this table's for family only. And for the first time in my life, I realized they never saw me as one of them, only as someone they could count on, until I finally counted myself out. It started with a phone call from my mom. Her voice had that syrupy tone she uses when she wants something sweet on the surface, sticky underneath. Eli, sweetheart, she began. We'd love it if you could make it to Mason and Brooke's engagement dinner. It's going to be such a special night. Of course I said yes. I always say yes. Then came the second part. Her voice dropped soft, almost embarrassed. And if it's not too much trouble, we were hoping you might help with the reservation. Just to hold it. We'll pay you back. I knew what that meant. We'll pay you back was family code for this is on you now. But like always, I nodded and stepped up. I called the restaurant, found a rooftop venue with just the right ambiance, string lights, skyline view, private dining. I made the reservation for 20 guests. I gave them my card. I paid the $500 non-refundable deposit without blinking. Because it was Mason's night, and because some part of me, some foolish, stubborn part, still thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time I'd be more than the quiet one who picks up the tab. In the weeks leading up to the dinner, I tried to feel excited. I bought a new shirt, pressed my suit, even had custom cufflinks engraved with Mason and Brooke's initials. I found a bottle of champagne from the year they met and wrote a card by hand. I told myself I wasn't doing this for recognition. But if I'm honest, I was. Not for applause, not even for thanks, just a moment. A seat at the table. A nod that said, you matter too. But the red flag had already waved. It wasn't the money. It was how casually they assumed I'd cover it. How no one even paused before passing the cost to me. How we'd love to have you there came tied to a bill. I'd paid for the reservation. I was bringing the wine. But deep down, I should have known I wasn't being invited to celebrate. I was being hired to support. And the worst part, I didn't see it coming. Because when you've been invisible long enough, even crumbs can look like kindness. The night of the dinner, I arrived right on time, 7:00 sharp. Freshly pressed navy suit cufflinks, gleaming bottle of champagne in hand, and a handwritten card tucked in my jacket. I took a breath at the rooftop entrance, ready to step into something I hoped would feel like belonging. The hostess gave a polite nod and pointed me toward the private section. The space was beautiful, soft string lights, live jazz floral centerpieces on every table. And there they were, my parents, Mason, Brooke, her family, all already gathered, drinks in hand, laughter echoing through the evening air. No one noticed me right away. I smiled and stepped forward. Waiting for the usual wave, the seat saved, the spot cleared. Instead, Mason turned with that same smirk he's worn since we were kids. "Oh, hey," he said, barely glancing at the champagne I brought. Then, with mock sympathy, he gestured off to the side. "Sorry, this table's for family only." His hand pointed to a folding chair off to the side near a trash bin. I blinked. Surely this was a joke. But no one laughed. My mom just smiled tightly, the kind she uses when she doesn't want to cause a scene. Dad raised his glass in a half-hearted toast. Brooke didn't even look up. So I walked to the chair, set the champagne down on the floor beside me, kept my coat on. The waiter came over and asked if I was with the party. I nodded. He handed me a glass of water without another word. And there I sat. For 2 hours. I watched them toast each other. I listened to Mason's long speech about the people who've always been there. I watched my mom tear up when Brooke called her the best future mother-in-law a girl could ask for. No one offered me food. No one asked me to join a photo. It was like I didn't exist, but I did. I was there, beside the trash. And the only thing more painful than where they placed me was realizing they thought I belonged there. As dessert was being served, some elaborate layered cake with gold flakes and too much ceremony, the sun dipped behind the skyline. The jazz band softened a background hum, and I realized not a single person had looked in my direction for over half an hour. I could have vanished, and no one would have noticed. Then the waiter returned, not to refill my water, not to ask if I wanted to order something. He came holding a small leather folder, the check. I watched him pause at the main table, glance around, then check the name on the card that had reserved the space. My name. He turned toward me. "Excuse me, sir," he said, gently lowering his voice. "The total for the event is 3,218. Would you like me to run it on the same card as the deposit?" Suddenly, every eye at the table turned. My brother didn't miss a beat. With casual ease, he said, "Oh yeah, Eli's got it. Like I was the event planner, the help." I smiled. Not a big one, just enough to feel the strength behind it. I looked up at the waiter and said clearly, "Not my table." The silence hit like a snapped wire. Mason's jaw parted slightly. My mother's brow furrowed. Brooke's father leaned in. The waiter blinked. "Sir, you made the reservation?" I nodded, and I paid the deposit. But I wasn't seated at that table. I was told it was for family only. "I'm over here, at the side table." I gestured lightly toward the trash can. A wave of discomfort spread. Mason shifted. My mother finally spoke, her voice low and tight. "Eli, what are you doing?" I turned to her, still calm. "Following the seating chart. You all made it very clear where I belong." The waiter looked lost. "You didn't eat, didn't drink. Didn't even take off my coat," I said, standing slowly. "I wasn't welcome, so I won't be paying." Mason snapped. "Don't be ridiculous. It was just a joke." I looked at him and replied, steady and final, "That's the problem. You think it's a joke because you've never been the punchline." Then I picked up my coat, nodded toward the trash can, and walked away. Not in anger, in clarity. For the first time, I didn't stay to clean up their mess. I thought that would be the end of it, me leaving the silence that followed, maybe a few awkward calls swept under the rug like everything else. But the fallout hit faster than I expected. That same night, still in my suit, still holding the champagne bottle, I never uncorked my phone lit up. First a text from Mason, "Dude, seriously, you couldn't have just paid and talked to me after." Then from Mom, "You embarrassed us in front of Brooke's entire family." Was that your goal? Revenge then? A call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe. "Hi," a soft voice said. "It's Brooke. We'd barely ever spoken. Just pleasantries over the years." So I was caught off guard. "I know we don't really talk," she said, "but can I ask you something?" I said yes. "Did you really pay for everything? The deposit, the flowers, the restaurant?" I paused. "Yeah, I did." Silence on the other end. Then she said something that made my stomach turn. "They told my dad it was your idea, that you insisted, that you didn't want to sit at the main table because you're introverted, that you left early because of a work emergency." I stood there stunned. "That's not true," I said quietly. "They asked. I said yes. I didn't do it for attention. I just thought it was a gesture." Brooke sighed. "Well, my dad's furious. He feels lied to. He wouldn't have agreed to the venue if he'd known they were putting the cost on someone they treated like a seat filler." She wasn't calling to pick sides. I could tell. She just wanted to understand what really happened, and I think for the first time someone outside the family saw it. Saw what I'd always felt, that I was never included, only expected. I thanked her. We hung up, and I stood alone in my kitchen phone, still in hand, realizing something huge. This wasn't just about a dinner, it was about every moment before it, and now that the truth was out, the unraveling had only just begun. I didn't expect Mr. Whitaker Brooks' father to be the one who finally tipped the scales, but he did. Hard. According to Trent, one of Mason's college buddies who still talks to me now, and then Mr. Whitaker had a full-blown meltdown the morning after the dinner. The man had planned Brooks' entire engagement season down to the last coaster, paid for her private schooling, helped her launch a marketing firm, and took real pride in doing things properly. So imagine his face when he found out the groom's family had lied to him about who paid, who planned, and who they humiliated. At brunch the next day, he reportedly said, "If this is how they treat their own blood, what happens when you marry into it?" That line spread through the grapevine like a spark in dry grass. Suddenly, wedding plans were paused. Brooke left their shared condo to clear her head. Mason's Pinterest board went dark. My mother scrambled into damage control mode, sending me a 5-paragraph email, not a text, not a voicemail, but a formal email. Subject line, "Please." She wrote that she never meant to hurt me, that I must have misunderstood, that it would mean so much to the family if I'd be willing to sit down with Mason and smooth things over. But nowhere in those 5 paragraphs was the word sorry. Just, "We didn't realize. You're being too sensitive. Let's not let one night destroy the bond we've built." What bond? The one where I canceled a trip to Spain because Dad needed surgery. The one where I co-signed a loan they never paid off. The one where I bought gifts Mason couldn't afford and delivered them on Christmas Eve while they called me overly serious. No. This wasn't about one night. It was about a pattern, a life built around the assumption that I'd always show up, pay up, and shut up. But Mr. Whitaker, he didn't shut up. And when a man with money influence and a moral compass speaks up, you can't just sweep that under the rug. For once, the fallout wasn't mine to absorb. Mason's life started unraveling. The wedding, the condo, the image, and all I had to do was nothing. Because the truth had finally spoken for itself. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a call I never expected. Aunt Karen, Mom's sister. Not exactly warm and fuzzy, but always sharp, always watching from the edges. We hadn't spoken in over a year. "Eli," she said, voice flat but focused. "I heard about the dinner. I braced myself for judgment." "Of course you did. I'm not calling to scold you," she cut in. "I'm calling to say good. About time someone shook the damn tree." That caught me off guard. She sighed. "I've watched your parents lean on you for years. Watched them make excuses for Mason while you played the role of accountant, therapist, Uber driver, and emotional landfill. I didn't know what to say. So I asked, then why now?" "Because now the Whitakers are involved," she said bluntly. "And your mom's in a panic. She called me yesterday, wanted me to talk some sense into you. And I told her you didn't need sense. You needed space." That was the first time someone in my family hadn't asked me to fix it, but to protect myself. That night, I made a quiet decision. One that had been building for years. I logged into the shared bank account I'd set up for Mason last year, back when he was between jobs and needed help covering just a few things. He'd never closed it. Still had his Spotify and gym membership linked to it. Still treated it like a safety net I never agreed to be. So I transferred the remaining funds, just over $2,000, into my private savings. Then I called the bank and shut the account down completely. The next morning, Mason called 4 times. When I finally picked up, he was panicking. "What did you do?" "My card's bouncing. I've got a date with Brooke tonight. I closed the account. You can't just..." "I can." And I did. A pause. Then the old tactic, blame. "You're just jealous. Admit it." "You've always hated that I get the attention," I laughed. "Mason, you really think Brooke's dad is on your side?" More silence. Then I said it. "You told me I wasn't family, so you don't get to spend like I am." Click, no yelling, no drama. Just the sound of a door finally closing. The email came 3 days later. Subject line, "I think we need to talk." It was from Brooke. I stared at it for a while before opening it, half expecting blame, half preparing for damage control. But what I read was something else entirely. It was longer than I expected. thoughtful, measured, polite, but with an edge of someone whose entire foundation had been shaken. She began by acknowledging how awkward the dinner had been, how she hadn't realized how I was treated until it all came crashing down. I was so focused on the night being perfect. She wrote I didn't stop to see the full picture. Then came the real weight. Her dad had been furious, not just because of the financial deception, but the principle. He told me, if they can publicly humiliate someone who made that night possible, how will they treat you in private? She didn't sugarcoat what came next. Mason downplayed everything she said. He told me you offered to pay, that you wanted to sit alone, that you left because of work. But something didn't sit right with her. So she called the restaurant, spoke to the manager, asked the waiter directly. And when the story fell apart, she wrote, "So did my faith in who I thought Mason was." Then came the line that stopped me cold. I ended the engagement last night. It wasn't just the dinner, she said. That moment was a magnifying glass, exposing things she had excused his entitlement, his deflections, the way he spoke about others when they weren't around. He kept saying you were overreacting. She wrote, but honestly, you were the only one who reacted with any dignity. She closed the email with no drama. No mess. I'm not writing this to stir anything up. I just wanted you to know I see it now, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I sat there for a long time, not because I didn't believe her, but because I wasn't used to being believed. It wasn't about the wedding, or the money, or even the chair. It was about finally being seen for what I gave and what I endured, and for once, someone saw it. All of it. And that was enough. It's been a few months since that night on the rooftop, since the folding chair, since the check I didn't pay and the boundary I finally did. Mason never reached out again. Brooke returned the ring. The wedding was called off. The group chat went silent. And me? I've been learning to enjoy the quiet, the kind that isn't cold or punishing, but peaceful, chosen. I took the trip to Spain I'd postponed years ago. I bought noise-canceling headphones. Started therapy not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to stop patching over wounds with loyalty. My mom came by once holding a Tupperware of lasagna and an apology that didn't come wrapped in denial. For the first time, she didn't ask me to forgive Mason. She just asked me to take care of myself. And I have. Because here's the truth. I didn't walk away from my family out of spite. I walked away because I finally realized if you always pay the bill but never get a seat at the table, you're not family, you're a service. So I left the table, built my own, smaller, quieter, but mine. If this story struck a chord with you, subscribe for more true stories of quiet strength, boundaries that heal, and voices that rise when silence has gone on too long.